council meeting, our first regular council meeting of 2022. Good to see everybody again. Call this meeting to order, and we'll do a quick roll call, make sure we're all here and that our technology is working. Councillor Foster.
Present.
Okay. Councillor McLean. Councillor Van Leeuwen is not with us today. He just sent his regrets about half an hour ago. Councillor McElwain.
Here.
Councillor Kittredge.
Present.
Councillor Dunsmore.
I am here.
Councillor McCrae.
Here.
Okay. Welcome, councillors. There have been no addendums or corrections to the agenda, so what you have in front of you is what we're going with. Disclosure of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act with anything on our agenda today. Okay, seeing none. We have several minutes there listed out. Approval and adoptions of minutes. I'll read the recommendation that the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meetings held April 28th and November 22nd, 2021, and the Council meeting held October 25th, November 8th, December 1st, December 7th, 2021 be adopted as circulated. Can I get a mover for that, please? Councillor Dunsmore, seconded by Councillor McCrae. Any questions, concerns with those minutes? All in favor? Opposed? And they are carried. Moving on to presentations and announcements. I have a very brief county council report to provide to council today. We had our first county council meeting on Thursday of the new year. We unanimously approved our 2022 budget, and I wanted to provide council with a few highlights. A 2% increase, significant investment in roads, capital infrastructure, public works facilities over the next 10 years. Including $41.2 million investment in facility upgrades. This year, 2022, we're going to be replacing the Arthur Public Works facility. Continuation of rural broadband investment to complete a gigabyte fiber optic build out. The county's contribution of $4 million over 5 years. It began this past year, 2021, and will continue between 2022 and 2025. Property acquisition and design for the construction of a new Erin Library branch. Implementation of the county's climate change mitigation plan. Land ambulance service expansion. We'll add a new 12-hour shift to improve response times across Wellington County. Affordable housing property acquisition for potential future development to assist meeting community needs. Waste management enhancements, including improvements to the Alora transfer station and 2 additional weeks of leaf and yard waste collection this fall. So those are some highlights of the county budget. County Council also unanimously approved our Roads Master Action Plan. The purpose of that project was to provide a long-term plan for county roads that identifies our transportation network improvements for the county's population and employment growth for the next 20 years. The plan provides a solid foundation to inform other county studies, budgets, and initiatives, and they will all proceed with future detailed project reviews, analysis, and consultation. A monitoring plan was also recommended, which includes the RMAP to be reviewed every 5 years and updated as required, based on changing transportation growth projections, industry and community changes, and new technology initiatives. So updates every 5 years to that plan. County Council also defeated a notice of motion that would have had us review the location of our administrative headquarters in Guelph to consider moving to Wellington Place in Aboyne. All the county councillors recognize the need for a conversation about this, but 14 of the 16 councillors thought that this was not an immediate priority for the current council. It should be left to the next council to discuss as part of their strategic planning process. So that's how that notice of motion went. As far as our county council meetings go, we'll be on Zoom again in February for our standing committee meetings and our council meeting, and then we'll be back to live meetings in March, hopefully. And that is my county update. Councillor committee updates, starting with Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Mayor Linton. I wanted to report briefly on Center Wellington Hydro. We're in good hands with our local utility, I believe. The utility's very committed to helping people through the COVID pandemic. We've been implementing the lower off-peak rates in the last little while, 8.2 cents per kilowatt hour for hydro. That's the pandemic relief rate, you might say. The utility is also working closely with any businesses in Center Wellington, working closely with them to help them through the difficulties of the pandemic as far as their hydro bills and loss of revenue. The utility's also been doing a public consultation process regarding their asset management plan, and you can find more information about it on Center Wellington Hydro website. So if anyone has any questions, I direct them to that website or wishes to have a look at that. Lastly, I wanted to report the utility, Center Wellington Hydro, the update work at the Sportsplex sports field, the new utility infrastructure. It's pretty much complete now, and that's a great thing for once we get back to regular business. That infrastructure in the back field is now ready for special events like Highland Games or sports tournaments. So that councillors may recall, we helped with that initiative, and it's now pretty much complete. So that's a great thing. Thank you, Mayor Linton.
Thanks, Councillor Foster. Councillor McElwain?
Heritage met this month, and most of the discussion is included in today's agenda, so I'll leave it until those topics come up in the agenda.
Thanks, Councillor McElwain. Councillor Kittrus?
Thank you, Mayor. Safe County Wellington Farm Safety didn't meet again, but Safe Communities did. And there were several initiatives, one about poverty and all traffic safety, and also community wellness. I initiated, from the meeting, I initiated some contact with our new CAO, Dan Wilson, to resurrect starting at least initiating, fulfilling our strategic plan on developing a safe communities group in Center Wellington. And I mean, it was just an hour ago that we've had a conversation with Christine Veet, and she's going to be sending the terms of reference, and anybody in the community that wants to help with this, developing this for next term, so we can get the terms of reference and everything established for next term, is welcome to contact the CAO.
Thanks, Councillor Kittrus. Councillor Dunsmore?
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mayor. The Economic Development Committee met for the first time this year, and to a person, they were all very concerned with the fact that we've gone into another lockdown. Although they understand that, they were concerned about local businesses and what kind of things we could do to help local businesses. So the Economic Development Recovery Subcommittee is meeting to see what kind of things that they could do. But pretty much everybody was in agreement. Businesses don't have an appetite to take on any more loans. And since we're a lower tier government, there's not a lot we can do outside of that. So we're, just going to get together as a committee to brainstorm and see how we can help the provincial government along the way. That sentiment was echoed at the BIA meeting as they were pivoting yet again in this COVID situation. However, the good news out of the BIA, the Fergus BIA, was they had a great Christmas season. A lot of the people in town stayed local, shopped local, and a lot of them, their sales were way up this Christmas because people did that. So kudos to the businesses for getting the word out, and to the residents for shopping local over the Christmas period. That will help them as we come back out of the lockdown now and see where we can land. So let's hope that stays. The CSAC committee met And that's on our agenda for today. They've done some great work in the grants approval, and they're looking for council to approve that. And finally, the hospital committee met, but I haven't got anything to report to council on that.
Thanks, Councillor Dunsmore. Councillor McCray?
Thank you, Mayor Linton, through you. Each January, the GRCA board elects a chair and vice chair to serve for the coming year. Mayor Chris White from Guelph Aramosa was acclaimed chair, and Mayor Sue Foxton, North Dumfries, was acclaimed vice chair for additional one-year terms. The board approved the resolutions in the following agenda reports. Draft inventory of programs and services. This is a requirement under Ontario Regulation 687/21 as part of amendments to the Conservation Authorities Act. Having approved the draft inventory and classification of GRCA programs and services, the next step is to circulate the draft inventory to all participating municipalities within the Grand River watershed for their review and comment. We also reviewed this and approved the second version of the draft budget for 2022. We also awarded refuse collection and recycling RFP to Wasteco to provide waste collection and recycling bin services for conservation areas, head office, and nature centers for a 3-year term. And we also approved a contract to Stantec for the Speed River hydraulic model development, which involves developing hydraulic modeling and floodplain mapping for the main branch of the Speed River from downstream of the Guelph Dam to the confluence with the Grand River. And then there was also a property disposition in the county of Brant that we approved. That's it.
Thanks, councillors, for those detailed updates. I just also want to mention that Councillor Foster and myself were able to do a ribbon cutting a couple weeks ago at the Scented Market downtown Fergus. So it was really good during COVID times to be opening up a new store in downtown Fergus. So thanks for joining me for that ribbon cutting. Councillor Foster is so excited to see a lineup of people outside of a brand new store in downtown Fergus. So that's good, and hopefully there's more of those things to come. Moving on to our agenda 5.3, Canadian Union of Postal Workers. So we have a representative here, Derek Richmond, and he has a delegation for us today. Welcome, Derek.
Thank you very much. Good day, Your Worship and members of council. My name is Derek Richmond. I'm the Ontario Region Coordinator for the Canadian Union of Postal Workers. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to council on expanding service and protecting public post offices. Our Delivering Community Power campaign reimagines our post office to be the hub for rural communities. Using our post office as a community hub that would provide much needed services that are lacking in rural Canada. The community hub model is currently being done in 2 Indigenous communities. These hubs have provided space for nonprofit organizations, an office depot kiosk, with broadband internet, printer, scanner, photocopy, so the community like youth, seniors can utilize these resources. These hubs could also provide much needed financial services. Currently, there is a pilot project to provide small loans through Canada Post, and it must be extended to meet the needs of rural residents that don't have easy access to financial services. Other services that Canada Post could provide at a community hub is hunting and fishing licenses, space for Service Ontario, kiosks, tourist information, library vending machines, space for farmers market and local art. Canada Post's 7,000 locations could be retrofitted with solar panels and create a secure coast-to-coast network of electric charging stations. This public charging network would lead to an additional tourism of rural Ontario for those who own electric vehicles. Canada Post can also become a leader in providing services to seniors through an elder check-in program. COVID lockdowns have taught us that seniors were the most vulnerable to the lockdowns, and the letter carriers check-in program can assist seniors who are shut in and provide additional security for seniors to live independently. Canada Post can provide delivery of grocery and medication to seniors that have a difficult time navigating through COVID pandemics. Canada Post must lead the way in a carbon-free post office. Currently, Canada Post has approximately 20,000 vehicles on the road daily, and converting the fleet to Canadian manufactured electric vehicles needs to be a priority now. so it can meet the 2050 emission targets. Canada Post must become a leader for a carbon-free, Canada Post must become a leader for a carbon-free delivery. To this date, close to 1,000 municipalities supported resolutions that have been submitted to the federal government on service expansion and postal banking. There are many innovative and forward-thinking ideas for a post-COVID recovery to improve service at Canada Post for rural communities and projects and protect good-paying jobs. This will enhance our national infrastructure, social communities, and strengthen economic viability of rural communities across Canada. But we still need municipal support like Centre Wellington to continue to put pressure on the federal government to ensure rural municipalities receive the service they deserve from their public post office. On behalf of the Canadian Union of Postal Workers, we ask that the municipality of Centre Wellington endorse the Delivering Community Power Resolution to support, retain, and enhance and expand rural post offices. Thank you for your time and support. I'm willing to answer any questions and address any concerns you may have.
Thanks very much, Derek, and thanks for coming today and present a delegation to us. The intent behind our community delegations is to provide an opportunity to present some of these things that aren't on our agenda already. And so I say thanks, we will receive that delegation. And do any councillors have any questions of clarification? We don't want to get into a full discussion here, but any questions of clarification for Derek? Councillor Foster?
Sorry, Mayor, did you call me? There was a silence on the line. I believe you called me. Is that correct?
It is correct, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Yes, thank you for the presentation. I just have a brief question, Mayor, for our delegation. Do you feel that any of our current post offices, Alora, Fergus, Bellwood, are any of them being considered by Canada Post as potentially extraneous, and I'll use the word at risk of being closed? Do you foresee that at all, Derek?
I'd have to dig into that a little bit deeper. I know there is a government moratorium to protect post offices through the government, and our collective agreement does protect 490 of those listed on the government moratorium as well. So I'd have to do a bit of research on that to verify, but I can definitely get back to you, Councillor Bob, on that answer.
Thanks, Derek. Any other questions from council? Councillor Kittredge?
Thank you, Mayor. I was just wondering, is there a budget attached to this? And it doesn't really go to our level of government. It's really for the federal, is it not?
Canada Post is self-sufficient. So all the funding that's directed through programs is funded through Canada Post and not the federal government. I believe that, if community hubs were to come to a municipality, I think it's vital that the municipality have some input on what they need in and out of their municipality. But the infrastructure in most Canada, well, I wouldn't say most, but in some Canada Post locations is already set. It's just utilizing that additional space to provide those services. And again, with assistance through municipalities, a community hub can look completely different in every different municipality across this country.
Thanks, Derek. Councillor McRae?
Thank you, Mayor Linton. Through you. Derek, would the post office union consider hydrogen-fueled vehicles as well as electric vehicles?
Absolutely. We're looking at all avenues to put pressure on Canada Post and the federal government to go electric. And if that includes the hydrogen batteries, absolutely.
Councillor McElwain?
Thank you, Mayor. Just curious, I'm assuming this proposal has been presented to the government, the part of the government that's responsible for Canada Post. Is there pushback, or is this something they are considering at that level, or is this simply and I shouldn't say simply from, but is it only Cup W that is presenting this?
This initiative was done through CUPW, but we are working with Canada Post right now. And I did mention that we do have 2 pilot projects going underway for community hubs that the corporation has agreed to, and we're hoping to expand that with the corporation and financial services as well. But we have been working with the federal government under the Way Forward report on Canada Post. There was 45 recommendations in 2017 to improve the post office. 8 of those recommendations, were based around community hubs in rural communities. So we are really focusing on working with the federal government to try to get Canada Post to implement a wide range of community hubs across the country and not just sporadic pilot projects.
Thanks, Derek. Any other questions from council? Okay, thank you very much for your presentation today, your delegation. It gives us something to think about for sure. And I appreciate you taking time to be with us today, Derek.
I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Moving on to our next delegation, we have the Pierport Neighbourhood Group. And we have representatives Melanie Lang, Peter Boyer, and Peter Van Vloten here to talk to us today. So I'll let, Councillor Foster, sorry.
Forgive me for interrupting. I just wanted to do a sound check. Is anyone else having sound issues, or is it my machine, or is everybody's technicals working well? So forgive me for interrupting, Mayor. I just wanted to do a sound check.
No, we do want to make sure you can hear Councillor Foster. I'm good here. Is everybody else okay? Yeah, it seems like it might be your area there. Well, let us know if you can't hear anything, Councillor Foster, and maybe you have to get back in and out again. Okay, so we have another delegation, Melanie, Peter, and Peter. I'll let you guys tag team how you see fit. And we have 10 minutes, so it'd be great to have you guys stick to close to that. I'll give you a couple, because there's 3 of you, I'll give you a couple minutes grace for sure, but I'll hand it over to you, and I'm sure you guys have planned who's going to speak first. Welcome.
Very good. Thank you so much for having us here. Hello, everyone. Good day, Mr. Mayor, fellow members of members of council, and also a special thank you to Ms. Carrie O'Kane, who helped organize us to be here today. So thank you for that. So we represent the residents of Lamont Street, St. George Street East, Anderson Street, Diane Crescent, and Sunnybray Crescent. While we are a local group, this site does have national interest by a wide and collaborative group interested in preserving this piece of land for its environmental ecosystem, cultural, as well as socioeconomic factors. These issues were brought forward to the County Roads Committee meeting in November of 2021. But since then, there has been a petition that was circulated and has garnered quite a bit of attention. So a fellow committee member, Peter Van Vloten, who is responsible for creating the petition, he is here today and will speak to that for a few minutes at the end of my remarks. So examining the existing traffic patterns as well as logical turnoffs, we do recognize and fully support a commitment to bypass Fergus east of town. So we see and understand a need for it. We simply ask that you look further east for a compatible option. So after consultations with county councillors, township councillors, as well as township staff, we would respectfully request that an amendment to the Center Wellington Transportation Master Plan be made to remove the bridge crossing at Highway 29 as it's currently listed as a preferred alternative. So that in specific, those in quotation is what we're referring to. And secondly, we hope that a designation of the Pierpoint Fly Fishing Nature Reserve as a cultural heritage landscape be made in the Center Wellington study and inventory. So by design, we understand that this is a living document, which was updated as recently as September. So the site in question is currently listed as needs more research. And so we're also here today to offer if there was anything that we could do to support those research efforts as well. So as I mentioned, this issue was raised before. And so since it was raised and brought forward to the County Roads Committee in November, there have been additional learnings and progress made that we hope to underscore, which will help with understanding the significance of the existing master plan options. So this site in particular that we're referencing here today is the first settlement of Fergus, beginning as far back as 1820, when Richard Pierpoint was granted 100 acres of land on the Grand River in Garifraxa Township. Pierpoint settlement was a settlement of Black Canadians, persons fleeing enslavement, and people wanting to build a Black community in Canada. In 2013, the Government of Canada named a federal building in London, Ontario, the Richard Pierpoint Building. The Pierpoint fly fishing reserves exist on the remnant lands of the original land grant. We should be protecting and celebrating this piece of our heritage. Richard Pierpoint is listed in the Parks Canada Directory of Federal Heritage Sites and is featured in the Canadian War Museum. So we understand that a National Historic Plaque will soon be located in Fergus, and we believe it would be appropriate if its location were on these lands, which we believe is an important honor for Centre Wellington as well as the town of Fergus. The Black Heritage Society has been consulted, are involved, and gravely disappointed in this decision. And my understanding is they plan to bring forward their own concerns on this proposal. Now, what makes this particular area along the Grand River special is the steady flow of cold water from Lake Bellwood, created by the Shan Dam. This stretch of the river below the dam has very limited impacts from agricultural as well as other uses along this stretch, and the water is very clean and clear. The rock bottoms carry a very productive hatch of aquatic fauna and insects, and it is this food source that creates the niche ecosystem that supports a complex web of avian predators such as owls, hawks, bald eagles, as well as a number of sound birds, as well as mammals such as beaver, otters, foxes, porcupine, and deer. A bridge crossing at this location would bring with it dust, noise, salt runoff, sand, and that would pollute the river and destroy this valuable ecosystem forever, and will have a negative continuous effect on all fish and wildlife populations that are currently thriving in this ecosystem. Dr. Ryan Prosser, who's Associate Professor of Environmental Toxicology within the School of Environmental Sciences at the University of Guelph, was contacted by Donna Starling, who is one of our committee members, and he is keenly interested in being involved. Dr. Prosser conducts much of his research along the stretch of the Grand River and is supportive of our efforts to bring environmental awareness to this issue. The unique and natural environment of the Pierpoint Fly Fishing Reserve is also a sensitive area and is provincially significant. The tourism income from the fly fishermen is sustainable, locally beneficial, and will be lost forever if this area is written off by heavy trucks. A study in 2012 estimated that the value of this activity in our area was 1.4 million. In addition, students from John Black School use this area often as pedestrians as well as for educational purposes. Melissa Mulligan, who is president of the John Black School Parent Council and mother of Connor Mulligan, who you may remember wrote a heartfelt letter to the mayor and to the editor of the Wellington Advertiser in support of protecting the river and Pierpoint Park. He invited Peter Bohl, who is here as well with us today, who is our lead representative, to attend an online parent council meeting. Peter was able to provide those in attendance with an overview of the issues identified by our neighborhood group and the processes we are following, as well as to address any questions or concerns that they had. There was a strong support offered by those in attendance, which we believe has led them to, attending as their own delegate to show their support of this cause in opposition to this location. In addition, and again, to underscore the significance of the chosen location, the township, who has previously agreed to several covenants registered untitled to the land, this proposed bridge and bypass at this location is in violation of this agreement, and there are legal implications to this. So just as we would like to close up my remarks, The current listed preferred alternative would result in an unacceptable loss of environmental, cultural, and economic values if it's not amended. And once lost, these values will be gone forever. So future generations would not be able to undo what we see as a bad decision. So to offer, anything that we can do at this point to support the decision-making that needs to happen and the decision that needs to happen. And just to close, to reiterate, we would respectfully request that the amendment to the Center Wellington Transportation Master Plan would be to remove the bridge crossing as listed currently as the preferred location. And secondly, that a designation of the Pierpoint Fly Fishing Nature Reserve as a cultural heritage landscape for this in the Center Wellington Study and Landscape Inventory. So thank you very much for your time. Peter Van Vloten does have a few additional comments to make, but just know that we are happy to take any clarification questions that you may have at the end of our remarks. Thank you.
Thanks, Melanie. Turning it over to Peter at this point. Which Peter is up to you guys?
I'll unmute myself. Good afternoon, everyone. I do have some slides to share if that's possible, so I'll try a share screen option here. See if that works. Share. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can, Peter.
Oh, great. Yeah, so the reason that we wanted to initiate a petition on this issue of the bypass was to demonstrate that this is really a broader question than just a small neighborhood group being concerned about trucks running through their neighborhood. So on January 13th, we initiated the petition, which was addressed to the Township of Centre Wellington councillors and mayor. And I'll just move on here. The text of the petition was really to outline the nature of the proposed bypass route to those who would potentially sign, and then to explain some of the concerns which Melanie has very well outlined related to that particular route. So the environmental sensitivity of the route, the importance of the heritage characteristics of Pierpoint Park, the internationally recognized fly fishing resource along this particular route, the educational recreational use of the park, and of course also the residential nature of part of the route of concern. So initially, I'll go on to the next slide, sorry. So the ask of the petition was, as Melanie had mentioned, to really remove the proposed truck bypass route option as preferred in the Transportation Master Plan. So we don't want that particular route to be part of that plan. So initially, I'd hoped that we would get a few hundred signatures on this petition, mostly from local residents in the area. And I was pleasantly surprised because within about a day of initiating the petition, we already had well over 1,000. And I checked this morning and we had about 13,400 signatures on this particular petition. They were not only local signatures, but they were also regional, provincial, and national, and actually even a few international. And the reason I really wanted to share this petition with you was because I felt it was important that we share some of the voices in the petition. And these, you know, there are a lot of people represented here and they all have their concerns. Not all of them made comments in the petition, but some of them did. And there are just a few comments here that I wanted to highlight for you. And here are some of them. This individual signing for their kids who use this space to learn and explore. The other respondent, don't destroy this environmentally sensitive area. I'm an avid fly angler, fishing the Grand River regularly, and we actually got quite a few of the signers with that particular sentiment. Preserve the history, preserve this gem, donate it for the purposes of recreation and family enjoyment. That was the Pierpoint fly fishing nature reserve aspect of this. This bypass route is a terrible idea. So those were some of the comments. This is an absolute jewel of Fergus, someone said. Should be maintained as a protected heritage site. Don't want this historical site destroyed. Existing bridge crossing the Grand River at the second line within 500 meters. And I think that was a common sentiment, that there's an alternate route that is much more feasible than the proposed route at the top of County Road 29. Must find less environmentally and culturally important options. Cannot undo what paving over does to green spaces and heritage. And I think that's something that both the county and the township councillors need to think about, is that this would be a permanent decision. This is not something that can be changed later. Once this decision, this kind of route is implemented, it really can't be changed, and it's there for generations to come. So, and runoff from the proposed bypass would affect water quality. So this is the last group of highlighted comments. Grew up walking there, preserved for future generations. This was actually a person who signed the petition not from Central Wellington, but was living somewhere else. I'm a fly fisherman, protect this precious natural resource. This will ruin the natural habitat. No heritage site should be endangered for a truck bypass. Have fished there for years and understand the importance. This was an individual actually residing in British Columbia, and destroying Black heritage is not acceptable. And the last comment that I picked out of the many that we received was, this shouldn't even be a debate. So I think there are lots of poignant comments there, and obviously a lot of individuals who took an interest in this particular issue from the region, from the province, and nationally. And they are really asking the same question or the same request as Melanie has pointed out, and that is to remove this particular route option from the transportation master plan. So I'm happy to take some questions.
Okay, so first I have to ask council, delegations have 10-minute maximum. We're at about 13 right now. Do we have consensus from council to let the delegation go a little longer here? Just nod, or yeah, okay. All right, thanks. And we'll leave the questions till all three of you are finished, and then I'll turn things over to council for questions. Peter Boyer.
Oh, Peter, you're muted. Yeah, Peter is muted, but it was just going to be myself speaking, and as well as Peter Van Vloten here speaking. So
okay,
we would be happy to use this time. So thank you for the additional time. And if there were any clarifying questions, we would be happy to take them now.
perfect. Well, thanks, Melanie, Peter, and really appreciate you coming to County Roads Committee as well. So I've heard this a similar version of this presentation there as well. So really great for me to hear such a well-organized and a lot of really good research. And that's why both of our projects, both the township's project as well as the county's projects, have significant community engagement components to them. So we hear these sorts of stories, because obviously we don't want to do something that is this detrimental to our heritage and to our landscape. So this is valuable information. We really appreciate it. I also want to take some time to thank Connor for sending in his letter. I love getting letters from students, and I appreciated his comments and the skill with which he wrote his letter. I really appreciated getting that. So thanks, Connor, and please extend thanks to both Connor and his mom for sending those comments in. We appreciate that. So let's have some discussion, some clarification questions from council. And I'm just going to go around the room. I think most of us will want to talk to this one. If you don't, just say pass. Starting with Councillor McRae.
Thank you, Mayor Linton. Through you, I have a couple of questions. One to the delegates. References made in your presentation to Huron Church Road. Is that road located in Windsor? And is it the primary corridor that connects Highway 401 to the Ambassador Bridge?
Peter, I think you're trying to speak, but you're muted.
Okay.
There we go. Yeah.
Yes, that reference is to air quality study that was done on Huron Church Road. Yes.
I think it's important for listeners to know that the Huron Church Road is the busiest trade corridor in Canada with approximately 10,000 trucks per day going down there. So to compare it to what we're proposing here, I think is a bit unfair. My second question is to Colin Baker. According to the county's RMAP report and the township's transportation master plan, the proposed bypass will cross the river east of the existing Richard Pierpoint Park and bypass the residential neighborhood rather than go through it via Anderson Street. Am I correct on that?
Colin? Sorry, Colin, we can't hear you. Well, we can hear you a little bit.
Yeah.
Oh.
How does that sound? Sorry, I wasn't expecting questions today.
Yeah, much too loud.
Much too loud. There
Just
we go.
kidding, just kidding. It's
Yeah,
fine.
okay. Yeah, so the route, so the route shown in the transportation master plan at the crossing anyway, there is an unopened road allowance that extends essentially from County Road 29 to Anderson Street, and it's, you know, kind of encompasses the crossing as well at that location. So yeah, I believe so Pierpoint Park would be located just to the west of that unopened road allowance.
So just to be clear, the road, the proposed bypass is not going up Anderson Street at all. It's actually bypassing the whole suburban area.
Through Mayor Linton, so essentially what's shown is using that unopened road allowance in the transportation master plan, and then the road swings to the east through the farmland and then connects to County Road 19. And so yeah, and that's at a master plan level. Again, these plans are prepared at a pretty high level. There would be a follow-up class environmental assessment that would look at in more detail a number of different options, crossing locations, the natural environment, heritage, and it would be done, you know, well in advance of any sort of construction.
Okay, I guess what I'm trying to get at is, in fact, this proposed bypass is not actually entering the Richard Pierpoint Park. It's actually to the east side of it.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna let Dan provide a few comments, and usually we don't do this for a delegation, but I know that Dan has been in contact with delegates, so I want to make sure that council is aware of those interactions that have happened. I think that's a good plan. Dan?
Thank you, Mayor Linton. Yes, I had the opportunity to meet with Melanie and one of the Peters earlier in January, and was able to take that discussion back to township staff and provide somewhat of a response to the group. But I just want to provide some of the highlights of that to council now. It may help answer some of the questions that you may have. There was at one point a discrepancy between the county's draft road master plan and what the township had in our transportation master plan. And as Colin alluded to, the fact that the county did amend their master plan before they finalized it to show a County Road 29 extension that is consistent with what the township had put in our transportation master plan, which is going east of Anderson rather than straight up Anderson. In addition to that, I believe the county also included additional alternatives for this crossing as well in their master plan as well. And through the final report from the county, I did see that they mentioned the concerns raised by the Pierpoint neighborhood group in their report as well. From a township perspective, as Colin alluded to, the transportation master plan from a township perspective is done at a very high level. A more detailed assessment, including an environmental assessment, including taking other factors into account, like the county MCR, taking into account any cultural heritage landscape implications would have to take place well before an actual river crossing is actually decided from a location perspective. So the way we see it, it's estimated that 1, if not 2 updates to the township transportation master plan will take place between now and when we think this river crossing is required. And from a timing perspective, this river crossing isn't in the township's forecast currently, and it's showing in our development charges background study as projected to happen between 2032 and 2041. So as I said earlier, there's a lot of planning that has to take place when we get closer to that time frame. We have to do a detailed environmental assessment, including a number of factors before an actual location is taking place, is considered. And we're welcome to initiate discussions with this group, the Pierpoint neighborhood group, when we get to the point of doing an update to the transportation master plan.
Thanks for those clarifying comments, Dan. Councillor Dunsmore?
Yeah, Dan, I want to thank you for clarifying a lot of that for me, because I had a bunch of questions around misinformation as to where this was actually scheduled to go. First off, I want to thank the residents and getting organized early in the process, because a lot of people leave it till the time where a sign goes in the ground and they realize, oh, something's coming. And to get involved in it this early, to give us an opportunity to hear your comments and to make sure your comments are looked at as we update the master transportation plan is good news. So I encourage you all to stay active in this. Richard Pierpoint has been a historic figure in this community. I think hasn't been highlighted enough for this community, and it's something I'd like to see changed. And the fly fishing has always been a great tourist attraction here. So I think as a council, this council, the next council needs to pay attention to that and make sure that we keep the fly fishery open and that we don't do anything to cause it harm. But most of all, we put Richard Pierpoint to the forefront. So I look forward to further discussions on this. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Dunsmore. Councillor Kittredge?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I'd like to clarify, I think it was on page 57, saying I was unaware of the designation of this area, but actually I worked very hard in the transportation master plan to make the road go around Anderson Street, because it is not a good idea to have truck routes through residential areas. This last summer, when one of the residents, Donna Starling, who's part of the group, but not a spokesperson, sent an email to the Colin Baker, I asked for clarification. He said that yes, indeed, the Anderson was the route, and I have now had a contact with the CAO, Dan Wilson, in several meetings. He'd asked me about meeting up with the group, because I met with the group and showed them that the Anderson Street was not part of this option. But I was also concerned about the park. And one of the issues here is it was listed as a possible cultural heritage group location, but there's not enough information when that designation is. I believe that there is a lot of information. It hasn't been collated together for the municipality. And I think that when we move forward, I'd like the CAO to comment on the possible route of the cultural heritage landscape designating this, and also just what exactly that would involve. It's not just this park. It's about showing what the area was for this heritage. And so I just would like some clarification from Dan Wilson about that.
Yeah, that's not really a Dan question, and it's kind of outside the scope of what we're talking about here. So, you know, if we do get more clarification on that, we know extra work has to be done. And I think Dan has let us know that extra work has to be done. And that will include a cultural heritage assessment on anything that's developed in the future. But it really isn't for a matter for this discussion today. It wasn't a question for our delegates. Councillor McElwain?
Thanks, Mayor. I really don't have any further questions. I just I want to thank the group for all of the work that they have done putting this information together. It was probably one of the most one of the best delegations we ever had as far as telling me stuff about the community that I was not aware of. So the background on Richard Pierpoint and everything else that they have presented has been very informative. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor McElwain. Councillor Foster?
Thank you, Mayor, and I too wish to thank Melanie and Peter for your work on this. It's very interesting to hear these items and hear about the petition. I have one question for, before I ask the question, I just want to point out one last thing, and that is this idea of a Fergus bypass. This is not a new issue. This has been, I recall studying this issue way back in the 70s in geography class at Fergus High School. So this has been an ongoing issue of a Fergus bypass, and I'm hopeful we can find a solution. My question, I guess, would be for Dan. There's talk in the master plan, Dan, of just building the road to the east of Sunnybray. Like, how would we do that? Like, would that land have to be expropriated, or how exactly would we just lay that road in there?
Yeah, sorry, similar to what I said to Councillor Kitcher, Councillor Foster, this isn't a question of the delegate. These are matters that we'll have an opportunity to discuss when we have different things come on our agenda. But we're nowhere near having those discussions yet. So thanks very much, Melanie, Peter, and Peter for delegating to us today. I appreciate that again. And I know we'll be talking more about this in the coming years. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you so much for having us here. And please don't hesitate to reach out if there's anything we can assist in these efforts.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. We will.
Thank you.
Section 7, going on to consideration of reports. The first item that we have as a report is community impact grant recommendations, and we have a report from our manager of community development, festivals, culture, and tourism, Dorothy Smith. Wow, do you ever have a large, long title there, Dorothy? Does it even fit on your business card?
It does, but it's about 3 lines. I have to look it up every time I need it. So thanks for reminding me of that. Good afternoon, everyone. Through your Mayor Linton, I just want to share with you that the Community Services Advisory Committee met in early December to review 10 applications that were received for the community impact grants. Upon reviewing the 10, we came to the conclusion that 2 of the applications were ineligible. They did not meet the criteria of the policy. And 1 application decided to withdraw their application at the last minute. So we were down to 7 applications. And I just want to share with you that all 7, they are recommending that we approve the funding. And those recommendations are listed in this report. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Great, thanks, Dorothy. And I got to get their recommendation on the table, and then I'll give council the opportunity to provide their comments. Recommendation that the Council of the Township of Center Wellington approve the grant allocations as recommended by the Community Services Advisory Committee as follows. The Children's Foundation for $5,000, the Community Resource Center for $3,000, the Alora Environmental Center for $5,000, the Alora Fergus Arts Culture for $5,000, Council, the Alora Festival for $4,400, the Alora House for $1,000, and the Grand Celtic Pipe Band for $5,000. Can I get a mover for that, please? Councillor Dunsmore, second by Councillor McCray. Any discussions from council? All in favor? And thank you very much. And thanks to the CSAC committee for again going through all of this work, and they volunteer their time on this committee, and they do an extensive amount of work. So Councillor Dunsmore, as our council rep, please pass on our council's thanks and the township's thanks to all the volunteers that provide this service for us. 7.2.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dorothy. 7.2, extension of the part lot control exemption bylaw 2019-04, and we have a report from our Managing Director of Planning and Development, Brett Salmon. Welcome, Brett.
Thank you, Mayor Linton. This is a part lot control exemption extension. Council previously passed bylaw 2019-04, and it is due to expire on February 12th of 2022. And the applicant surveyor here contacted staff late last year to ask about having the bylaw extended. We've consulted with our municipal solicitors, and they've provided us with the form of the bylaw that's necessary. So this bylaw will extend the period for a further 3 years, and it just applies to the lots that are remaining that haven't yet been sold. And those are lots 7 and 8, which you can see on the sketch that's attached. This is actually the first time that I've done a bylaw where we've been asked to extend it before it runs out. Normally we find out after the fact when there's a closing that the bylaws run out and there's a panic. But this time they got it to us before. So it's good to see.
Thanks very much, Brett. I'll read the recommendation. That the Council of the Township of Center Wellington give 3 readings to a bylaw to extend part lot control exemption bylaw 2019-04 pursuant to section 57.4 of the Planning Act. Can I have a mover for that, please? Councillor Dunsmore, second by Councillor McCray. Questions from council? Councillor Foster?
Thank you, Mayor. Brad, I have a question, and you know, we do deal with these occasionally, Brad. I was just kind of wondering, you know, what would be the outcome if ever this kind of matter was ever defeated or didn't pass? What would be the result?
Well, there'd be a couple of potential outcomes, I guess. In the case of if we refused a part lot control bylaw, the option would be to go through land division and apply for a severance, which is more costly and time consuming. So, you know, the worst scenario would be that it would delay the acquisition of a house by someone who's bought a house. So if you look at the example here, lots 7 and 8 look like they'd be split into some detached dwellings or 2 small singles. And if there weren't part lot control in effect and they wanted to sell, they'd need to go through the severance process. The part lot control is customarily used as a simplified process.
Thanks, Brett. Any other questions from council? Okay. All in favor? And that is carried. Moving on to zoning bylaw amendment, application RZ 11-18. Over to you, Brett.
Thank you, Mayor Linton. If council recalls, last fall, it endorsed the draft plan approval of a subdivision in Inverhaw that's pasture edge. So we sent forth to the county our recommendation to give draft approval with our conditions. The county subsequently did grant the draft approval late last year, and the appeal period expired. So the decision to approve the subdivision is in effect. One of the conditions is that the lots be zoned appropriately. And so the applicant has asked, now that the draft approval is given, that the township move forward with passing the zoning bylaw amendment. So the zoning bylaw changes the current zoning to R1A and open space to reflect the residential lots and the open space that's present in the subdivision. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Brett. I'll read the recommendation and then turn it to council. That the recommendation of the Council of the Township of Center Wellington approve application RZ11-18 and that a bylaw to amend the zoning bylaw be given 3 readings. Mover for that, please, Councillor McElwain, seconded by Councillor Dunsmore. Any questions on that one? Councillor Kittredge?
I'm going to ask Brett. So what kind of public announcement was made for the public to make submissions for this?
Well, in this particular case, being there was a plan of subdivision, that there would have been a public meeting held previously that was a combined public meeting for the subdivision and the zoning amendment. Those were in 2019, I believe, but there hasn't been any changes. And I think the public consultation is addressed in the staff report that I did on the subdivision, which is appended to the report here.
Anything else from council? All in favor? And that's carried. Moving on to 7.4, partial demolition of a listed heritage property on 127 Princess Street in Alora. And we have a report from Mariana, our senior planner. Welcome, Mariana.
Thank you, Mayor Linton. Through you, the report before you is regarding a partial demolition at the listed property known as 127 Princess Street in Alora. The owner has requested demolition of the rear sunroom addition and the front porch due to condition, and also due to plans for future new rear addition and possibly a new front porch. So the matter went to the Heritage Committee in December 7th, where it was considered. The committee had no objection to the demolition. So the recommendation is that the demolition be permitted to proceed and that the property remains on the municipal register as a listed property. And I'm pleased to answer any questions.
Thanks, Mariana. I'll read the recommendation that the Council of the Township of Center Wellington approves the partial demolition request for the rear 1-story 3-season sunroom addition and front porch of the listed property known as 127 Princess Street in the Township of Center Wellington, and that the property remains on the Municipal Heritage Registry as a non-designated listed property. Can I get a mover for that, please? Councillor Dunsmore, second by Councillor McCray. Any questions, comments from council? All in favor? And that is carried. Thanks, Mariana. Moving on to another partial demolition at 377 Getty Street in Alora. Back over to you.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Linton. The partial demolition request is for a detached garage at 377 Getty Street. The garage was constructed much later than the dwelling. The date is not known, but it's probably the mid 20th century. So due to a condition, again, the owner has requested demolition and plans to replace it with a new garage. This went to the Heritage Committee at its meeting on January 18th. Again, there were no concerns or objections. So the recommendation is that the demolition be permitted to proceed and that the property remain on the register. And I can answer any questions.
Thanks, Mariana. I'll read the recommendation that the Council of the Township of Center Wellington approves the partial demolition request at the listed property known as 377 Getty Street, Alora for the detached garage only, and that the property remains on the Municipal Heritage Registry as a non-designated listed property. Can I get a mover for that, please? Councillor McElwain, seconded by Councillor McCrae. Any questions, comments on this one? All in favor? And that is carried. Thanks, Mariana. Moving on to the appointment of municipal law enforcement and property standards officers. And we have a report from our manager of legislative services and clerk, Carrie. Welcome, Carrie.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Linton, this is a housekeeping matter. Staffing changes within the Planning and Development Department have warranted that we update the bylaw that is now here before council.
Thank you, Carrie. And I'll read the recommendation that the Council of the Township of Central Wellington execute a bylaw to appoint municipal law enforcement and property standards officers. Can I get a mover for that, please? Councillor McCrae, seconded by Councillor Dunsmore. Any questions, comments from council? All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Foster, I didn't see your hand on that one.
I'm supporting it.
Okay, thank you. And that's carried. Moving on to demolition control on the 6914 second line in the Township of West Garifraxa. And I see from a recommendation that we have menu options here. And firstly, I'll turn things over to Randy, our Chief Building Official. Randy.
Thank you, Mayor Linton. Good afternoon, members of council. The staff have received a demolition control application for the property located at 6914 second line. That's in the former township of West Garifraxa. This is a two-story house, and as per standard procedure, this application was circulated internally for comments as part of putting this report to council together. This particular application went to the Heritage Committee, and they reviewed the application for demolition, and they have I came back with a recommendation that council state its intention to designate under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. So you can see in the report the supporting documentation for that. So in this particular instance, for this demolition control application, there's two options before council today. One of the options is to approve the issuance of a demolition permit to demolish the single detached dwelling, or the other option is to refuse the demolition request and state council's intention to designate the property located at 6914 second line in the former township of West Garifraxa under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. It is a fairly detailed report, so I would be pleased to take any questions that council may have on this.
Thanks very much, Randy, for that. We also have the owner, Glenn Leachy, on our call today. And I'm going to give Glenn an opportunity to speak to this as well, if he would like to. Glenn? Okay. He might be having some technical difficulties. Maybe we can get him on if we have any questions for him. But I will turn it over to council for their thoughts. I'm going to start with Councillor McElwain as the representative on our Heritage Committee. Councillor McElwain.
I guess the owner has provided the information we asked for from the Heritage Committee, and had the and it's I guess the only thing I would suggest is that I think that the building does demolition is probably the best solution, but if there could be reuse of the product, or I'm not sure even if that's realistic, but just based upon the report from the engineer, then I don't think it's reasonable to try to preserve the building, I guess, is the bottom line.
Thanks, Councillor McElwain. Councillor McCray?
Thank you, Mayor Lind. I guess I find this challenging due to lack of information. I think it would have been helpful after listening to the December 7th Heritage meeting and what the owner provided to the committee and the structural information provided. It would be helpful to have some interior photos to see some of the challenges that were described. Also, observing the Heritage Committee's December 7th deliberation on designation was equally challenging. The discussion was awkward and lacked genuine commitment in deciding designation and deciding to put it forward towards council, because it seemed that they too were lacking information. And what seems to be missing here is there has not been an actual site analysis done where the committee has actually gone to the site to have a look firsthand at the building. I feel that should happen. If not, and we're to make a decision, then what I did is I look at the aerial photos and I look at how far the house is from the actual road, and it's approximately, one second here. It's about 890 feet away from the road. So in terms of the public's interest, they would not even be able to see the building if it was preserved. Plus, the owner is not obligated to allow public access to the property to see it. So I wonder, what is the purpose of trying to preserve the building? I understand that its history is primarily linked to it being the birthplace of a Kenilworth blacksmith. And so what I'm thinking is, would it be possible to designate the property and not the building itself, and allow the demolition to proceed? I guess that would be a question for Mariana. Could we recognize the historical significance of the actual property as being the birthplace, but not preserve the building? Because frankly, I think the building's not worth saving.
Mariana, do you have any comment on that?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mayor Linton. It is possible because designation runs against the title of a property. So the designation bylaw itself would be registered against the property. And then what happens is that the heritage attributes are listed. So the values and the attributes specific to what needs to be maintained over time. So specific elements on the property, any structures can be specifically included or excluded, and that would be part of the bylaw itself. So that is, there's potential to do that, as you're suggesting.
Just to clarify with that for me, Mariana, if the structure though was allowed to be demolished, what else could be protected on a property though? Like a couple trees or what?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the utility of protecting a property if you're not proposing to save some of the elements. You might be talking more about a commemorative strategy or some type of a historical account of the property itself that might be even linked with the Lions blacksmith shop. So it could be part of the story, but typically you would designate to protect tangible elements and physical elements. It would also tie it up with administrative processes for any alterations to the property, because it would then require a heritage permit for any changes unless specifically excluded in a bylaw moving forward in the future.
So I'm thinking more of a commemorative.
Thanks, Councillor McCray. Councillor Dunsmore?
Yeah, and could I get some clarification, please? Councillor McElwain, are you saying that there's information in this package that the Heritage Committee did not have?
Councillor McElwain?
There, sorry. The engineer report there I don't recall it being there for the Heritage Committee. And Mariana, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I just don't remember it being there and with quite so much specific information as we received, as it is included here. Am I wrong about that?
Through you, no, it was not available to the committee. The committee there was a suggestion made that a structural analysis should be done. And if the owner was objecting designation, then that information should come forward to council. But it's typically, if I can just add, not something the Heritage Committee would consider unless it was really compromising the integrity of the building to such an extent that the building was no longer viable to be protected. So otherwise, a Heritage Committee would not consider structural analysis.
Okay.
Thank you. That's kind of what I remembered, and I wanted to make sure I wasn't incorrect in answering Councillor Dunsmore.
Okay, but you said there that you thought the Heritage Committee would have voted a different way, Kirk, if they had this information. Is that right?
Basically, the Heritage Committee, as was already pointed out, felt that we didn't have enough information. And so we asked for more to come to council.
Okay, so now we have the report that says it's in disrepair, and I'm wondering if we grant the demolition permit, if there's a way to save, you know, I think somebody's already mentioned it, the facade or something, so that the museum in Kenilworth could use portions of the building or something in their museum as opposed to just losing this altogether. But if it's in the disrepair that the report says it is, then I'm thinking it might need to be demolished.
Councillor Kittrus?
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question for Mariana. I'm just wondering how many of these types or architecturally this style are left in Center Wellington? And I'm just wondering, is it like few, or there's, you know, like when does it become the case where it should be mandatory that it's designated, like for preservation of like that it's a heritage style that might disappear and we might never see it again. But basically, I have to be, I years ago, I went through this building when it was up for sale, and it's in bad shape. Like, it's not in good shape. I didn't want to make any investments in that. So, I mean, I can see that they're like, I sympathize with their understanding, just from a thing. And I think that the Heritage should actually take a look at when they're saying, when they're even considering designation, unless it's like the very last, you know, the last 5 left in municipality or something like that. But I'm just wondering, like, what is the status of this style?
Mariana?
Thank you. Through you, I would say it's a rather typical style, the Ontario Gothic cottage style. So it's not rare. It's not a rare example. I think when the committee looks at it, it looks at all of the values, which it has to in terms of assessing them. And this one had the Historical Association as well that made it, that deemed it a little bit more significant than a typical farmhouse would be. So that is the reason why they made, the reason that they recommended designation. I can't say how many of this are remaining, this type of structure or this style, but I would say they're quite common in the rural area.
Councillor Foster?
Thank you, Mayor. Firstly, I just want to refer to the recommendation we got from our own Heritage Committee, which basically states that Heritage Center Wellington objects to the demolition of this building and recommends that the property be designated. That to me is a very, very clear recommendation, and I'm a little perplexed that we're even considering 2 options when that is the recommendation. So my question, I guess, for Brett is really, Brett, I recall you speaking to us back in June of 2020, and you told us that the municipality is responsible for compliance with Section 3 of the Planning Act, and that states very clearly that we have a duty to conserve our heritage resources. why then, Brett, are we even considering options that ignore our own Heritage Committee and may even result in non-compliance with Section 3 of the Planning Act? Why would we even consider options like this?
I'll turn this to Mariana. She's our heritage person here. Mariana?
Thank you, Mayor Linton. Through you. So it's council's decision to determine what is significant to the community. And the Heritage Committee is required to be consulted. So this is the Heritage Committee's best assessment of the property and their actual recommendation. Now, if a property meets even one of the criteria, it basically warrants designation. The provincial policy statement and the Planning Act require that cultural heritage resources shall be conserved. So it is something that is brought to council and for council to determine whether this is considered a significant cultural heritage resource to this community. So that is the question that's being asked here. And the Heritage Committee's recommendation is that it is.
Any other final comments from?
Second question, Mayor.
Go ahead, Councillor Foster. Go ahead, Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Mayor. So what I'm hearing is that we're required to consult with Heritage Center Wellington, or they are required to be consulted, but we can ignore them if we wish. That to me doesn't really square up very well. And I'm just wondering, Mariana, you haven't really given us a report as our heritage planner. I'm just wondering why you haven't given us a full report as part of this report. With a clear recommendation as our heritage planner.
Well, firstly, I want to respond to the first comment because it gets to the role of all of our committees versus the role of council, and all members of council should be aware of this. Our advisory committees provide advice, provide recommendations to council. As council, we're the elected representatives for this community, and so we make decisions. So sometimes we go by the recommendations of our advisory committees, and sometimes we don't, because their mandate is different than our mandate. We have a broader mandate as members of council, and that's where a structural assessment, for example, is more important to members of council than it would be for the Heritage Committee, because their scope is related to heritage. And all of us who have sat on the Heritage Committee remember times when, from a heritage perspective, something might make sense. From a council perspective, our mandate is a little bit different. So I think all of us understand that. Mariana, was there anything else in Councillor Foster's question that you'd like to respond to?
Not at this point. I can answer specific questions about the heritage value of the property, but as I said, it's the Heritage Committee's recommendation that this property be designated, and they're tasked with that responsibility to look at heritage across the township to see which properties should be included and should be recommended for designation. In terms of, I think they try to balance, always trying to protect the most significant and not trying to protect everything, but rather the ones that, you know, might yield an understanding of the evolution of the township and its growth moving forward and its settlement patterns. And this is one of the properties that they felt was important enough to be to come to council and to try to prevent the demolition. And I'll also point out that demolition is typically a last resort. So if the owner has provided sufficient information to satisfy council that that's the only option, then that should be considered. But also there is the engineer's report or the structural contractor's report would suggest that there is an ability to upgrade this property, as happens with most other rural properties of this nature. Old farmhouses typically do need to be upgraded. So it's not out of keeping with that, that requirement. And also, I think the report does say that the foundation and most of the building is actually in pretty good condition, provided it is repaired, that there's some repairs made. So it's not, I would say, it's not impossible to fix this building. And that's really the only thing that the Heritage Committee would look at structurally, is whether the building can be repaired or not. So that's all that I wanted to add to that.
I just want to make sure, Glenn, can you hear me? Are you able to make a couple comments on your property? No, just when we have the property owner on our call, I would like to hear from them if we had an opportunity, but it doesn't seem like we can get his technology to work. Any final comments from council? Anything new? Councillor Foster?
My question for Brett, then Brett, you know, Heritage has advised us that they recommend that we designate it, or we have a duty to conserve our heritage resources. My question is really simple, Brett. If we grant demolition of this property, will we be in compliance with Section 3 of the Planning Act?
Mariana?
My question is for Brett.
Mariana?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Linton. The Ontario Heritage Act actually, it puts the power in the council's hands. So the provincial policy says significant cultural heritage resources shall be conserved, but it is up to the council to determine what is significant based on the criteria. So it's really up to the council to determine.
Anything to add, Brett?
Yeah, well, we have a demolition control bylaw, and under the demolition control provisions, it is a bylaw under the Planning Act. Council's options are to allow the demolition or to refuse the demolition. That is in the legislation. The policy statement is not a law. The policy statement's a policy statement. The law we're talking about here is the demolition control provisions. And so council, those are your options, approve or refuse. What's in front of you as the reason why you might refuse is the designation brought forward from the Heritage Committee. And again, as Marianne has pointed out, designation is ultimately council's decision.
Thanks, Brett. Thanks, Mariana. I'm going to read the first recommendation here, that the Council of the Township of Centre Wellington approves the issuance of a demolition permit to demolish the single detached dwelling located at 6914 Second Line, former Township of West Halifax. Mover for that, please. Councillor McCray, seconded by Councillor Dunsmore. All in favor? Opposed? And that carries. Thanks, Council, for that. Thanks, Glenn, for being on.
Mayor Linton?
Thanks, Glenn, for being on the call. Councillor Foster, do you have a point of order? Councillor Foster, do you have a point of order?
Yes, Mayor Linton, I tried to summon you, but I don't think you saw me. I'm just calling for a recorded vote on that matter.
Sure, we can do that. I'll turn it over to our municipal clerk for that recorded vote.
Through you, just to be clear, that was on the issuance of a demolition permit. Councillor Foster?
Opposed?
Councillor McElwain?
In favor.
Councillor McCray?
In favor?
Councillor Kittredge?
Yes.
Councillor Dunsmore?
Yes.
And Mayor Linton?
Yes.
It does in fact carry. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to 7.8. Actually, before we do that, we're going to take a bit of a break. We've been at this for a while, 2:30. Let's take a 7-minute break and get back at it at about 2:37. Okay, welcome back, Council. 2:38. We're at 7.8, the Arts, Culture, Heritage Grant applications. And we have a report from our Chief Administrative Officer, Dan Wilson. Over to you, Dan.
Thank you, Mayor Linton. So this is a continuation of a discussion that we had with council as part of the budget process for the 2022 budget. At one of the pre-budget meetings, a resolution was passed by council to initiate a grant application process for the arts, culture, and heritage portion of the OLG funds received in 2021. And it was agreed through that application that council would review and allocate the grants subsequent to budget approval. We did receive just over $1.2 million in OLG funds in 2021, which is slightly higher than what we were planning as part of the budget process. So it resulted in proceeds allocated to arts, culture, and heritage of approximately $64,750, or 5% of OLG proceeds received in the previous year. And there is $4,500 included in that amount that represents amounts that were unused from the previous year. But in total, we have $64,750 as an upset limit to allocate. Through the grant application process that was made public at the end of 2021, we did receive 5 applications. The actual applications are attached to the report for council's review. So through attachment C to attachment G of the report, we have applications from the Fergus Scottish Festival, Wellington County Historical Society, Alora Center for the Arts, Fergus Agricultural Society, and KIP Alora. Total requests sum up to $79,270, which is $14,520 over the allocation as per our policy. So we did, in the resolution to this report, show what the allocation would look like if council decided to proportionately allocate the funds based on the requests received. That is everything I wanted to outline. We did provide a summary of the applications in attachment A to the report, and we provided the actual eligibility criteria in attachment B. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Dan. Questions from council? Councillor Foster?
Thank you, Mayor. Just to be clear, Dan, so we had 5 applications and we have 5 allocations. In other words, all applicants received at least something.
Dan?
Through Mayor Linton, yes, we set up an option for council to consider where we proportionally allocated the total funds received based on the request. And I think it worked out to approximately 81% of the request for each applicant would use up the $64,750. So that was one potential way in which council could consider the applications.
But everyone gets a little something done.
Yes, that's correct.
Councillor McElwain?
I have no questions. Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Kittredge?
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Dan, for telling us that everyone got some money. But I guess my question is, they didn't get all their funds, and that we lacked those funds from the OLG during the proportion. And recently there was an article in the newspaper about online gambling. And I'm wondering, how do you see the effect of those funds then for, well, it'll be the arts and cultural one, but also the economic development. So how do you see the future if the online said, I think it was about $800,000 we'd be short. So well, how do you see the future of funding this?
Dan?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Linton. This is something that staff communicate to council as part of each budget. The township is very much dependent on external sources of funding and internal sources of funding when it comes to capital investment, asset management planning, and in this case, arts, culture, and heritage funding. If we do end up seeing a reduction in OLG funding in the future, which is an external source of funding, which is very uncontrollable to the township, the plan should be to try to increase our controllable or internal investment in asset management planning, so that if something does happen to these external sources of financing, we have funding available to invest in our assets and provide programs such as arts, culture, and heritage on an annual basis. We do have the policy currently where we only use the funds once they're received. So in this case, OLG funds received in 2021 are used in the 2022 year, and that's one way of ensuring that we're not overspending. But I do agree that if external sources of funding do become a problem, we need to focus more on increasing our internal or controllable funding.
Just to add on that, Councillor Kittrus, there may have to be an advocacy piece to this as well. I know that I received some correspondence from the Mayor of Milton, who is the chair of the municipalities that do have gaming facilities. And there will be a lobbying effort to ensure that municipalities continue to get their fair share of these proceeds. So in addition to what Dan was saying internally, there will be that effort, and I will keep this council apprised of anything that we're doing as part of that group, because that is concerning. I heard that, I saw that report as well, Councillor Kittrus. Councillor Kittrus?
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a follow-up. I was just wondering about, you mentioned like if that, I mean, obviously there's a lobbying, the mayor has mentioned the lobbying thing, but I was just wondering as part of our growth policy and funds, like whether we could allocate certain portions of that to be dedicated to arts, cultural, and community things as a dedicated amount. Is that possible in the future? Like if we were like certain amounts is asset management, certain amounts staffing, certain, like, can we do that? Like, could cultural be part of that?
Dan?
Thank you. Through Mayor Linton, that's a possibility. What I would suggest is, as we review the OLG allocation policy annually, how we use growth is also reviewed annually as part of the budget process. So I would suggest as part of the 2023 budget process, a good conversation between staff and council can take place about how growth is actually spent. And I know there is a strategic initiative that council included in the strategic plan that growth should pay for growth. So that's one aspect of using growth, but we can consider other alternatives as part of the budget process.
Councillor Dunsmore?
No, I have no questions. I see that it's all fairly allocated. Everybody got the same percentage of what their ask was. And I think that's about the fairest way that you can do this, given the unknowns of what kind of slots money are coming in. So good report and a good concept, Dan.
Councillor McCray?
Thank you, Mayor Linton, through you. The approach taken in considering the various applications as well as the decision is fair, in my opinion. I support the staff's recommendation.
Okay, thanks, Councillor. I'm going to read the recommendation here. That the Council of the Township of Center Wellington approve the 2022 Arts, Culture, and Heritage grant allocations as follows. Fergus Scottish Festival, $13,600. Wellington County Historical Society, $1,225. Alora Center for the Arts, $34,405. Fergus Agricultural Society, $11,436. KIP Alora, $4,084. Can I get a mover for that, please? Councillor McElwain, seconded by Councillor McCray. All in favor? And that is carried. Thanks for that, Dan. Moving on to 7.9, consolidated linear infrastructure environmental compliance approval. And I will turn things over to our Managing Director of Infrastructure Services, Colin Baker. Welcome, Colin.
Great. Thanks, Mayor Linton. And members of council, the report before you today is an information report, just updating you on a new approvals approach being undertaken by the province of Ontario. And it really applies to stormwater and wastewater assets of the township, and what we call the linear infrastructure, which is essentially a fancy word for pipes. And so that we're talking about essentially our stormwater and wastewater pipe system. And really this new approach applies when we're looking at any sort of reconstruction, new subdivisions, whether they be industrial, residential, and also the extension of municipal services. So under the current process, you may have heard the term environmental compliance approval, and we require an environmental compliance approval. It doesn't matter if it's 40 meters of sewer pipe or 1,040 meters of sewer pipe. We need an environmental compliance approval from the ministry prior to issuing a tender, prior to constructing that infrastructure. So what the ministry is proposing that essentially they're getting out of the approval business for this linear infrastructure. And so they're proposing to issue permits now, similar to our current drinking water works permit, that will essentially transfer the responsibility for those approvals to municipalities. And so we're expecting in the not so distant future to really get 2 consolidated environmental compliance approvals, one for our sanitary sewer collection system and one for the stormwater management works as well. And so we've basically gotten notice late last year from the ministry that we need to apply. We had a deadline for our application of January 21st, 2022. And through December and into January, staff were assembling that information, a lot of it electronic, our existing approvals, our GIS data, and all that was packaged and submitted to the ministry in time for the deadline on January 21st. And so we do anticipate that we will get the approval or our new permit sometime probably in the early summer months. And so that's essentially transferring the responsibility for approvals for linear wastewater and stormwater to the township. So a pretty big change to our business processes internally. Great news in terms of timing for approvals. Quite often we'd submit to the ministry and it would take 6, 9, 12 months sometimes to get those approvals. And so with this change, we'll have the ability, as long as the designs are done within set design standards set by the ministry, we'll have the ability to issue approvals in a lot shorter turnaround time. So good news from a business perspective, especially with the business park servicing. We're not too far away from kicking that off. And so that'll likely be kind of one of our first kind of internal approvals for the sanitary sewer and the storm sewer works within that business park. So just an update report for council. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks very much for that information, Colin. I'm going to read the recommendation, then I'll turn it to council. That the Council of the Township of Center Wellington receive as information an update on the township's consolidated linear infrastructure environmental compliance approval for sanitary sewer and stormwater works. I get a mover, please. Councillor Dunsmore, seconded by Councillor McElwain. Any comments, questions from council? All in favor? And that's carried. It's nice to hear that the province trusts us for something. Moving on to 7.10, Haylock Park Development Agreement Report. Managing Director for Community Services, Pat can't be here today. So we're going to have a bit of a tag team here. Brett is going to be introducing this project from a planning perspective. Then we're going to be turning it over Matthew and Matt Tucker for going over some of the park attributes and the characteristics. And then Dan will follow on and talk about the development charges. So that's what we have on the agenda as far as their presentation goes, and I'll turn it initially over to Brett. Welcome, Brett.
Well, thank you, Mayor Linton. Pat nicely provided a little bit of a script for what she was going to say today, so I get to use her script as well. She wanted me to note that this is a process that's been going on for a couple of years now. As council are aware, with regard to the Haylock farm development, we've already seen before council a subdivision agreement and a service financing agreement have both been to council previously. And at the time of discussing those two agreements, the developers made it very clear that they also had an interest in advancing the development of the parkland in the subdivision, and that they would like to execute a similar agreement with us to deal with the development of the parkland. So there's been work ongoing for about 2 years. And we have representatives from the developer, Jeremy Grant's here on behalf of Haylock Farm. Bruce Youngblood is on the call on behalf of Bruce's side of the development, which are moving forward, at least in the park sense, in tandem. And we also have from Community Services, Matt Tucker, the manager of Parks and Facilities Operations, and Matthew Alain, who's the landscape architect and urban forestry project manager. So by way of background, the developer hired a landscape architect to prepare a design for the park in concert with the township staff. That's gone to fairly detailed construction drawings. All that's been done at the developer's expense. We have an agreement that's before you that provides for the developer to construct the park infrastructure, if you will, and divided the costs between the basic services that are normally the cost that any developer would incur to leave us with a park that's in condition that we could then take and create a park. And then the second are the park services that normally would be funded from development charges. And that includes playgrounds, pavilions, pathways, the landscaping. All those park things are things that the township normally would construct after the fact. And in this case, this agreement provides for the developer to construct them. And then the third component is, in this case, we have the developer stepping forward to provide some enhancements to the park that go beyond the standard that development charges would fund. And those are listed in the agreement under park enhancement. So there's some entry features, stone walls, an amphitheater, things that go beyond the normal park standard that the township would construct, that the developer is constructing here. So I believe it's been left for Matthew Alain and Matt Tucker to walk you through the slideshow that is the details of the actual park development itself. And then Dan Wilson's going to explain how the financing works, and we can get questions from council after that.
Okay, I'll jump in. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Great to see everybody. I have slides to go along with my presentation, so just wondering if I could get slide 1 up, if possible. Sorry, was that? Do you have that, Lisa, or do you want me to? Oh, perfect. Great, no, thank you. If you could move to the next slide, that'd be great. So here we have just the overview of both developments. You'll see along the top part of the page is South River Road. At the bottom of the page, we've got the Trestle Bridge Trail. So it's compressed in there. And we've got parkland
that's with a trail system sort of separating the two developments. So it straddles the property line. On the next slide, it just provides a closer look at where the parks are located. So basically, there are two parks and a trail system. The trail system, it goes around the storm pond, and not all costs are part of the park development. They're part of the storm water development, but everything is all interlinked to one trail. And that's all sort of broken out into the design and costing. Could you switch to slide 3, please? So this here is a concept of the Haylock Park. And with this park, it is already naturally forested, lots of trees. And this basically park really focuses on the natural forest on the land. So this area will have seating areas with game tables, an amphitheater, and a path through the center of the park. So that is that, and yeah, it's more, this setup is more of a passive park. Could you just switch to slide 5, please? Okay, this here, it just basically is an overview of the Haylock Park, and it just it points out the different features that'll be part of the project to help put the park together. So it denotes where the stone walls will be, the amphitheater, and the seating. So that'll be used moving forward. Move to the next slide. Okay, this here is Harrison Park. And basically this connects to the Trestle Bridge Trail. And this park also will have an asphalt trail. This park will be an active park, which will have a playground, shade structure, an open area for a natural ice rink. And some of the enhancements here include more elaborate park entrance features with landscaping and stone wall features. And with these stone walls, all the stone are all from site. Also, developers have requested to use wood from the trees removed on site to build a shade structure. They also would like to create more of a natural playground to enhance the natural environment of the park. And staff, we're going to continue to work with developers on these details and added costs. What cost would be above what the township would normally pay for a playground in a shade structure. So this will be part, again, of the developer's enhanced cost. On to slide 6. Sorry, yeah, great, thanks. Sorry, as this park is developed from concept to the actual drawings, we might have to shift a couple things around just for proper drainage, and also just to save trees as well. So we might have to deviate a little bit from this plan just for those factors. Next slide. And yeah, this will be our working drawing as well. It'll show the locations of where the features and the trail will all connect. And so basically, with that, the park timing is 2022 to 2023. Sort of our next staff will use CW Connect to share this information with township residents. These slides here were shared at the last CSAC meeting, and was supported by CSAC and the features included in each of the parks. really, there has been no opportunity right now for public output, but comments can be collected through CW Connect. And that's the end of my portion of the presentation.
Matthew, are you going to speak next?
Through you, Mayor Linton, Dan was going to touch base on the next topic. Sorry.
On the financial side? Okay. I thought Matthew wanted to talk about trees, but I'll turn it over to Dan.
Thank you, Mayor Linton. I just wanted to go over the how the service financing agreement works and the associated costs associated with the project, so council understands how that works. So within the service financing agreement itself, you'll see that the combined cost of both parks and the trail system is anticipated to cost just over $858,000. Of that, roughly 108,000 is what we call local service, and local service costs are costs borne by the developer. We have a local service policy included in our development charge background study that outlines what a developer is responsible for versus what the township is responsible for, and these are costs associated with developer borne costs of approximately $108,000. There are approximately $604,000 in what we call DC credit eligible costs. And these are costs that are typically borne by the township in constructing park amenities that we are having the developer construct on our behalf. And we will pay them back through what is called DC credits. So as the development proceeds and building permits are issued and development charges are paid on the various lots within the development, we will reimburse the Parks and Recreation portion of the DC back to the developer until that $604,000 is paid back. So it's a very good cash flow mechanism for the township to pay back the DC eligible costs as the development is reaching capacity. The third component is what Brett had referred to as enhancements, and they total almost $146,000. These are costs for amenities over and above what the township would normally construct. Because it's above our current level of service, we can't use development charges to pay for these costs. So the developer has offered to pay for these enhancements, like I said, totaling approximately $146,000. In order to provide a better level of service to this development, which I think is great news to the community, and the fact that we're getting an improved park or parks and trail system because the developer wants to enhance the overall network. That's everything I had, Mayor Linton.
Thanks very much, Dan, and Matt and Brett. We also have on the call here, we have Jeremy Grant from Haylock Farms as well as Bruce Youngblood. And I'm going to give either of them or both of them the opportunity to make some comments before I turn it over to council for their council's questions and comments. Jeremy? Just click on your unmute.
Sorry about that. Normally I don't have it on mute. Thank you, Mayor Linton. And I don't have a lot to say other than I think what Matt and Brett and Dan have summarized is accurate and reflects the agreement. And I think the main point that Haylock Farm would like to make is that we're very excited about being able to put these parks together. And we've worked, like they said, for quite a while now with the staff and the landscape architect. I think the parks will be phenomenal additions to the community, and we're looking forward to going to the next step. I'm available, happy to answer any detailed questions you have. And I know Bruce is here as well, and I'll hand it over to Bruce if he has anything more to say.
Welcome, Bruce. It looks like you have an unstable internet connection there. All right, well, Bruce, oh, there we go. There we go. Now you're moving around. You're frozen for a bit. You're still on mute, but go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I seem to be having a bit of a fainted signal, so I'll be brief. Again, the report seems to capture the intent, and I think Jeremy has again summed up the feeling of us wanting to provide higher level and get on with it. Thank you.
Good. Thanks, Bruce. Thanks, Jeremy, and thanks, staff. Turning it over to council at this point, starting with Councillor McCray.
Thank you, Mayor Linton. I support the staff's recommendation. This is an exciting project, and I appreciate the developer's interest in enhancing the park's features to a higher standard at their expense. Thank you very much.
Councillor Dunsmore?
Yeah, I've seen this at the CSAC committee meeting, and so I'm familiar with it, but I'm really want to say thank you to both Haylock Farms and Bruce Youngblood for upgrading things to a level that I think the rest of the community should be proud of, and we should be pushing that as a standard across the community. I think your use of using the wood from the trees that are taken down in order to build the development in the first place, and the stones, and recycling that, I think is fabulous. And the fact that you're willing to pay for those upgrades, well, thank you.
Councillor Kittrus?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to echo what the other councillors have said. I am very, very pleased with the way this park development went, and I'm very impressed with the enhancements that the developers have contributed. That goes a long way to helping our community and making it a better parks. I know that sometimes other developers, we've in the past, we haven't had an agreement that's as enhanced as this, and I'm very pleased that you came forward and did those improvements. Thank you.
Councillor McElwain?
Also, just like to echo what everyone else has been saying, that very impressive park layout. Very thankful for the developers for their contribution, and looking forward to seeing it all happen.
Councillor Foster?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to the two applicants here. I'd like to, there's not much more I could add other than it's great to see these enhancements. I wondered if I might be able to hear from Mr. Youngblood. Bruce, from your perspective, I'd like to hear more about the rationale for the enhancements you proposed, and I'd just like to hear a little bit more from your perspective. What makes you want to do this, and what do you see as the benefit?
Bruce?
Well, through the mayor to Councillor Foster, largely driven by Haylock Farm, who are in the process of doing their construction of residences now, and the desire to see the park put in place as early as possible and to a higher standard, reflective of what is anticipated to be the end user. So it's maturing in more quick step time. Really, that's the sum of it.
Thanks, Bruce. Thanks, councillors, for those comments. I'm pleased at how well we worked. Our township staff have worked in concert with the developer on this project. It's good to see our community services folks involved in a development like this. That isn't always the case, and I think you see the result. You see the positive result from having our team working directly with the developer. And thanks to the developer for the upgrades. This is a pretty special piece of property, and I think we all know that as representatives of this community, and I know that the developer does as well. And the interconnectedness of the trail and the different uses of the park, I'm really excited about what this is going to look like. And so thanks for coming to the table. Thanks for all the teamwork. On behalf of the community and council, thanks for putting in the extra money to make this a special group of parks and trails. So appreciate that. Now let me get the recommendation on the floor. I have a recommendation of the Council of the Township of Center Wellington authorize the mayor and clerk to execute a parkland development agreement between the Township of Center Wellington and the developers Haylock Farm Limited, Haylock, and 123856 Ontario Limited, Youngblood. Can I get a mover for that, please? Councillor McElwain, seconded by Councillor Foster. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you very much. Thanks for being with us today, Jeremy and Bruce, and thanks for the report, Township folks. Moving on to bylaws, 8.1. We have a series of 4 bylaws there. I have a recommendation that bylaws 2022-01 through 2022-04 be read a first, second, and third time and passed and signed by the mayor and clerk and the corporate seal affixed. Mover for that, please. Councillor Dunsmore, second by Councillor McCray. All in favor? That's carried. Notices of motion. Motion where notice has been given, none. Confirmatory bylaw, recommendation of the bylaw 2022-05 to confirm the proceedings of council at its meeting held January 31st, 2022. Be introduced a first, second, and third time and passed in open council. Motion moved by Councillor Kittredge, seconded by Councillor Dunsmore. All in favor? And that's carried. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Kittredge, seconded by Councillor Dunsmore. All in favor? And we are adjourned. Have a great rest of the evening, everyone. Great conversation today.